days like, where's Awang? Where's Awang? And then Awang was trapped inside the car for the whole night. Ada. Thank God.
Thank God ada.
Jadi Jacob
But
masih
Auntie
itu.
closed the car door without realizing he was
Dia
there.
tak mau tinggal dengan uncle sudah sebab
Ada.
dia tak boleh keluar, dia macam
Dia boleh sudah.
Sebab nak
So
kesian.
he's inside. Dia keluar sudah.
Aku telah hilang. Kalau tak ada dia di dalam.
kalau saya pun kena kurung di dalam
Ini yang paling terbaik saya draw.
apa tu?
Ini. Saya draw gambar picture.
Oh, this one is itu ke?
Yeah.
So cute.
We got Angie, or is she not coming?
I want the
Not coming.
Aku jadi seksi.
Oh, Angie. Sorry.
Missing Angie, is it? Is that all? Angie? Also Dio?
Yes, it's outside. You can start already.
Sit.
Oh, and he needs to send his her mom to see doctor.
Kamu mana?
Can you stop? I'll just ask Nima to open us with a prayer.
I'm gonna go off to the washroom in just a second, and then we can start. Are you able to see screen sharing?
Yeah.
Is this on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Lord Jesus, thank you for this morning. We want to learn what Jesus from the book of the Bible. I pray that you will help us understand and give us the revelation. Lord Jesus, from the teaching, and I pray for Chad that he will pour your anointing upon King of Jesus, and whatever he teach, Lord Jesus, you will come to you, Lord Jesus, and you receive the truth. Thank you, Lord Father. In your name I pray. Amen. Amen. Chad is in the toilet. Wait for a while.
So what? Yeah, you all like love. Wow.
Pun boleh.
Sudah lah.
Saya jalan di Facebook. This is how best I draw compared to sin. They are sin, but still look at them like
See what's that?
they did it.
Compared to Israel.
Sin, but God still look them.
This is sin.
No.
No, he said this is beautiful compared to the sins of
Even
Israel.
though they are sin, tapi Tuhan tengok mereka masih cantik.
Hello.
Mana tengok lagi?
Tadi dia yang ambil aku minta masak kecil.
Sudah makan saya.
Luar biasa. Tak dia bagi. Empat. Dalam
Sekali.
sikit-sikit saja.
Macam
Macam kasih tambah sedikit.
Are we able to put a breakout room for Rufus and LC?
I can do that now. You want to do it now?
Yeah, in just a moment. Okay, Lucy, LC, you able to hear okay? Right. Larita, you can hear okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Asway, this morning, you sore? Muscles a bit sore? Last night, Asway playing badminton. Nima, whoa!
Yes, yes.
I asked Kimmy, who is the most competitive of you and Asna, Kim, you and they're very skillful actually. So I play badminton a bit, but I don't play like that.
How many?
Yeah.
And then Solomon comes, he's standing like this. I'm scared, man. Kyler and I start to play, and then we're like, oh, we're playing the wrong game. Not like this. Uncle Kong me. Shoot, 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 shoot. Crossing on. Woo.
Scary. Scary. Writing is very scary. Really?
Yeah.
I don't want.
Fun to watch. Nice to watch.
Fun to play with him, but to compete him, no.
Ah, good to be on his team.
Yeah.
Semalam saya kena smash.
It was fun to be with. But I mean, I know some people were loving Jesus and loving their family and praying for other people. So it's okay. We forgive you.
I was glad they are not to come to
Yes.
the place.
Well, kita berdoa ya. Father, thank you for giving us your word. Thank you for letting us learn of our ancestors and our history as your followers, learning of those who've gone before and their mistakes and their successes. God, thank you that we can read. We can read in our own languages. We can read in different languages. Thank you for access and freedom to study your word. God, thank you for this opportunity. As we dive in today, we invite you to teach us your words. Father, would you open our ears to hear, our eyes to see? We need you. We love you. We are yours. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. I am so aware, like we just have so many things to learn, but I also don't want to spend all the time talking. And sometimes you lose it all if I just keep talking. So I just need wisdom to how can I introduce correctly, but also let you participate. And so just asking God for wisdom, how do I do this? Sometimes when we have a lot to do, we just talk, but maybe that's not best. So I'm looking at everything again this morning, wondering how can we do this? So we'll see how. Trust God for grace. All right, Rufus, Elsie, we're going to put you in a breakout room so you can participate in this. What we're going to do is just go through a couple slides from yesterday, and you will teach the other person one slide for about 30 seconds, 20, 30 seconds, share what you remember, and then the next slide change so both people get a chance to review what happened yesterday. All right, so Hima, can you be with Theo? And now that Grace is gone, we don't have anyone to start breakout. Check that.
Kamu boleh terus juga coba. Kamu boleh nikmat GPS dengan
Breakout. Yes,
Konsiko kinoringan, kuma di Tuhan, onsuan kino marano, maranku.
Just as we're ready, Grace ran away.
Ulun tulun sama sudah
You want to break up again?
Yeah, can you just put them in a breakout room? You can
Singaranum.
probably just set it for 5 minutes and then. So Elsie, Rufus, when you finished, when the slideshow finished, even if the breakout room isn't finished, just go ahead and leave and then join back, okay?
You could do it.
The breakup function is gone.
Can you make me a co-host?
I make you a host. Maybe because of that.
Did you make me host already?
Yes, I already make you a host. Maybe because of that,
All right.
No hawak. No hawak. Senang-senang
Senang-senang
E.
senang-senang
All right.
Alright. Go. Let's go.
Are you able to see Elsie, Rufus? Are you able to join the room?
yeah, they're gone.
We lost them. Good. All right, here we go.
Because I make you a host, so I don't have that function anymore.
Okay.
Di sini.
Grace. By the way, you can't see this. I think
They
the
cannot see.
breakup room.
They cannot see.
Yes.
Ah.
Because that was what I did last time. And they said,
Okay. We
ini tentang dekat keladatan dari Zekia.
Oh dia cari tu.
You know what? Maybe you just bring them back into the main room and then let them talk to each other on Zoom and we just quiet our voice.
sounds good. Do we need to tell them that?
Yeah.
Ini dia motornya.
All right. Can you let them know? You cannot see it, right?
No.
Okay. So we are going to let you two just chat. We're going to mute you on this side so we cannot hear you, but just take turns sharing, but then you can still see the screen.
Oh, okay.
Are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we just need to mute.
Betul.
Okay. So this one finished already?
Belum lagi di sini.
Balloon?
This guy
Who is it?
is one of the kings.
King Hezekiah. It
Could be. Yeah.
doesn't look like.
I
Because you
think
were
so.
sharing about King Hezekiah yesterday.
Yeah. So
And
could be him. You want to start?
you want to start?
Oh yeah, sure.
Hezekiah.
Hezekiah.
Yeah, so yeah, this guy, he was considered a good king. He turned Israel to their ways of following God. He did. I think he did away with a lot of idol worship, the shrines and all that.
Hmm.
Jadi dalam satu malam bila askar
And this was when Assyria they come and siege Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah relied on God to fight for him. And the angel of God come and wreck their camp.
jalan yang sama,
Yeah.
datang jalan yang sama dia balik.
Jadi ini adalah
The Assyrian means represent the Assyrian Empire, and Judah is just a small, tiny spot surrounded by the Assyrian Empire. And there were three. The Egyptian kingdom is at the southern. Babylon is just beside the Assyrian. This is what is this?
I never seen this. What's this here?
I think this is the trading lah. during the the King Manasseh. Yeah, they were having like tradings and all that. Yeah, but during Manasseh, so he works together with the Assyrian kingdom, the empire. So, hey,
I think this one is still Manasseh.
yeah,
The reason he worked with them was for
yeah,
economic gain, because
yeah.
they were the superpower and they're huge market for them for Israel to sell and buy. So he adopted their practices, not their idolatry, whatever, so that they will be supported by the bigger country.
Yeah. Okay, this is I remember this.
So I think it's for the Asherahs, they involve themselves in all these religious practices for fertility, for harvest.
Yahweh plus there are other spiritual beings. Yeah, I think I haven't come to Elohim yet. Elohim means guru plus not other spiritual beings, not just one God.
Last one.
Then is the behaviors which are influenced by the values, which are influenced by the beliefs. So I think they were going through yesterday the Israelite behaviors, why they commit all this idolatry.
Yeah, what they do, what they think. Yeah.
What influenced them? Is it because of security? Because they want a sense of belonging, or they think they'll get happiness by following all these practices? And at the core of it is a belief issue, because they don't believe that God can meet these needs. They don't believe that God is sovereign in this place or in this way, so they go and sell themselves to others.
Okay, how was that? Kenna?
Yeah.
I heard Zam talking a lot.
Same.
Please say the same.
No, actually, you want to say something? Say the same.
Yeah, right. LC, Rufus, how was it?
A bit.
Were you able to help each other a bit? Fill in any gaps?
Yeah, Rufus did most of it.
Yeah. Good. So what questions and clarification do we need? As you've thought about yesterday, as you've even looked at these slides, some of the things we talked about, is there anything you need a bit more clarity about, understanding, you've got a question?
So far,
Okay. Okay. Again, if you've got questions, feel free to ask. So we are going to start with our belief system again. So we talked about yesterday, we've got this this egg, and we can look at the outside and see what is done, or what people do, what they say. It's the outside, we call behaviors, what we do and what we say. But inside, there's also this egg yolk, the egg white, and this represents what? Value. What are values? What are values? What you like, good, keep going. Values are what is important. Yes, very important to us. What we like, what we want, and influence what we do. What influences what we do? What is like the egg yolk inside? Our beliefs, our worldview, and that is like what is most real, what is most true. So a lot of it has to do with how we see the divine, the spiritual world. Is it real? Is it not? Where do we come from? And we're going to talk about this morning this idea of the purpose of humanity. Where did humanity come from? So now that you're writing, I'm going to mess with you. Go ahead and stand up. Everyone stand up, face this wall. Oh, yeah. So Israel is surrounded by very powerful nations, very large empires. Actually, Israel itself was an empire for a short time under Solomon, but then all these big empires surround them, and all these empires have their own ideas about where humanity came from, where the world came from, origin ideas, and the core belief at the center of the egg, it's going to affect what they value and how they behave. So, who can tell me what is bottom right down here? Which empire? Babylon. Good. What is bottom left over here? Egypt. What's up here?
Syria.
Syria. Good work. Okay. In the center is Canaan and Judah. Good. Up here is
Assyria.
Very good. Okay, so up here,
Assyria. Syria. Egypt. Babylon. Canaan.
Good job. So these are very powerful empires, and they were coming and going. At the time of our story now, who is the biggest empire?
Assyria.
Assyria. Good. Today, that empire is going to change. We're going to have a shift. So what's interesting, in the ancient Middle East, they had ideas of how the world came to be. And many of these ideas were that the world is a result, like Earth as we know it, is a result of conflict between the gods. And humanity is a result of conflict of the gods and the gods creating humans as slaves. So here's an example. This is a scroll from ancient Babylon. It is called the Enuma Elish. It's called the 7 Tablets of Creation. It's a Mesopotamian creation story. This is a story the Israelites would have known. They would have heard. Assyrians believed parts of it. Babylonians believed parts of it. The Egyptians had elements. They're all kind of coming together. It's one of the oldest stories in the world. And this is what the story tells us. In the beginning, the earth was chaotic. There were troubled waters. And out of these waters came a deity, a female deity and a male deity. And out of these two mated and began having offspring, more deities. So when I say deities, it's gods. It's Elohim. All these little gods were so noisy and caused so many problems. The father god couldn't sleep. So he was angry and he decided he was going to kill his children because he wanted to sleep. He told his wife the plan, and she told the oldest son. And so the children gathered together and they killed their father. And the mother was angry, so she created many-headed dragons and monsters to destroy her children. So now the mom and her pet monsters are in conflict with the children Elohim. And they're fighting, and one of her children manages to kill her, the mother god, take all of her monsters and like puts them under his feet. So now all of his siblings are now bowing to him. He assigns them to different places. He takes his mother's body, rips it in half. He puts one part up here and we call it the heavens. He puts one part down here and we call it the land or earth. And then he sits on his royal throne to rule all of his siblings and all the other gods. But he's a bit bored because he still has to do some work. So he says he brings one of the gods that worked with his mother and brought him in, and they kill this god because he was on the other team. Take the blood, he gets the blood and gore of this dead god, mixes it with dirt and creates humans to be his slave. So humans are the result or slaves of the gods. The heavens and the earth are the slayed enemy of this god. Now, what is the name of this conquering god that defeated the other ones and put all the other gods under his feet? Great guess. Baal, great guess. You probably don't know this, so it's not in your text. You won't know it, but this is what's really interesting. His name is Marduk. Marduk is the highest god in Babylon. So if you want to know what the Babylonians believe, they're worshiping a god who kills family, who puts other gods under as slaves, who uses humans as slaves to get what he wants. The world is a result of violence and conflict and treachery, and it's not a beautiful picture. What's interesting is you look at Babylon, you look at Assyria. This is the picture of Marduk slaying his mother, or Tiamat. Tiamat is also a multi-headed dragon, the chaos dragon of the sea. If you've heard of like Leviathan, there's some different whispers and mentions of this. Some people think it's the same one. Babylon becomes an empire that uses violence and slavery and domination over people to exert themselves to a place of power and control. Now, when you worship a god like this, you become like the god you worship. The Israelites seem more impressed with all of these gods of the surrounding regions than they do their own gods. And the prophets are challenging the belief system of the Israelites to say, you look just like everyone else. You think just like everyone else. You act just like everyone else. Your entire belief system and value system and action, your entire thing is corrupted. I made you different. And there's a different story. The prophets remind the Israelites through Moses. Moses says, hey, in the beginning, it's chaos. There is a darkness and a formlessness to humanity. And in this space, what do we see? In the beginning, the earth is formless, and something's happening over the surface of this chaotic water. Who can remember Genesis 1? Yes. Who is in this chaotic water? The Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God hovers over this chaos. The picture is of like waves in the ocean, darkness, and also the picture we see, it's called tohu vavohu, wild and waste, the wasteland, the desert. And they're both pictures of chaos, non-order, wasteland, not yet ready. And God's presence, he comes and he does this. He brings life, he brings order, he brings structure, planting a garden in the desert. And then, as he brings this structure and beauty and life, he fills it. And how does he create? How does God create all this? He speaks. Let there be light, and there was light. Okay, so is there violent conflict of trying to be in control and power? Is there, he speaks and it happens. This is a very different story. And when he creates humanity, he speaks and humanity is formed, right? When God creates humanity, he speaks and humanity is formed, right? Esther? Yes, good job. It changes. When he makes humanity, what does he do? He gives breath, but before breath, molds them. So here is this maker of all that is so powerful and so able that Elohim of Elohim speaks and everything happens. But when he makes humans, he gets down in the mud and the dirt and creates with his own hands, so to speak, humanity. So humanity slaying of betrayers, taking their blood to make these slaves, or the creator so values and so loves his creation, he gets involved with it, gets very close. Now, how close does he get to humanity? How is he going to make this pile of mud come to life?
By speaking.
Breathes. Like, okay. No. Close. Okay, let's try this. See, okay? They need to see. Okay, I'm going to share breath with you. Ready? How close do I have to be to share breath with you? Ha! Who do we share breath with? No one, right? Think about all the people you know and love and your housemates and your friends, and who do you share breath with?
For myself.
And mask.
You wear a mask, you can't. Smart. Good job, Nima. Social distance. The list of people I share breath with is very small. My wife. Sometimes I will kiss my children, but even then, normally not on the mouth. This is extreme intimacy. This is the closest connection. This is this all-powerful, beautiful, wonderful maker that comes so close to humanity. It's the most intimate connection, closest connection. And then what does he say? Here's the earth. I made it for you. Take care of it. Rule over it. Make what is in this garden fill the earth. Create more. I made you like me. Work together with me. Let's fill the wasteland with the beauty of the garden. Made for partnership, made for relationship. Humanity is not a slave of the gods. Humanity is valued and esteemed and given this incredible purpose. Work together with me to see this expand. Little different than blood mud to be slaves of the gods just so the gods can get what they want. Very different story. And the prophets are reminding Israel, this is your story. This is what humanity's for. These other nations, they have different ideas, but the ideas affect how we live. So if you don't understand who God is, you don't understand who you are as made in his image, you're just going to follow all the other things. Humanity's response. Yes, God, we will rule with you. We love you. How long did that last? What happened when they took the fruit that God asked them not to take? Eyes open. Their eyes are open, but really one thing that's very important here is it talks about the knowledge of good and evil. Before that, they had to ask God, what is good, what is bad? And he would talk to them. Even like gardening, they don't know how to garden. So they talk to God. How do we plant like a papaya tree? And then how do we raise up durian? And like, so they're in conversation. Well, when they take the fruit, they said, I don't need your help. I will decide what is good and what is bad. I don't need you. I don't need to be in relationship. I don't need to be in partnership. I'll decide myself, which is really, I'll be God. Let me be God so I can choose what I want. I can take care of things the way I want to. We will rule the earth without God. That's what happened when humanity rebelled against him. And this is the story. I mean, when you read this, the entire story is humanity saying, I don't need you, I'll do it myself. And God saying, I made you for relationship and partnership. Come, join me, work with me. I love you, I love you, I love you. And this wrestle all the way through. And it's not just in this story, it's our story now. Still to this day, all the way through the Bible and history. All through DBS, we've been learning. Israel failed to be the kind of people God created it to. They just wanted to look like everyone else. What was God's response? When humanity rebelled, did he just say, keep going, it's okay, I don't care? What was his response? Stop! So he sends prophets and others to say, this is not how you're meant to live. All the other nations live like this because they believe something different. I have shown you what is true so that you can represent me well. Let's get into Jeremiah. I'd like you to, can someone read Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 7 to 8, and then someone else is going to do 11 to 13. And this actually, you know what, I want you to do on your own first. Let's just read it on your own. And this is what I'd like you to do. I want you to observe who did what. So there's a bunch of different people involved. Who, and like, and what is their action? What are they doing? So we'll just take about 2 minutes to do this. Who did what? Look at this man. Who did what? Rufus, are you checking it out? Got it? Chocolate. So who can start us off? Give us one of the who. Who is Jeremiah talking to, and who are we reading about? Actually, why don't you, just call it out. Starting in chapter 7, who is he talking to? Chapter 2, verse 7.
Yeah. God is talking to the people.
Okay, so he's talking to the people of Jerusalem. Who else?
Talking to the priests.
Priests, rulers, prophets. Anyone else? Okay, let's just start with the people of Israel. There's one more you missed. Judges. You see that? Political 7 and 8. Sorry, 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Okay, the priests. What did the priests do?
Did not ask.
They did not ask God. They are to be God's representatives, and they didn't even ask God. Okay? What about the rulers? They turned against God. The prophets?
Spoke in the name of
They're speaking in the name of a totally other Elohim. They're giving advice from another lesser Elohim. What about the judges?
the judges. Yes.
You have it?
Wasting time.
The judges ignored me.
Yeah, I have to do
What does your version say?
Those who thought my word.
Those who taught my word. Yes. So, I mean, this has to do with political leaders, maybe even religious leaders as well. So they ignored my, what did you say? Ignored my word or my law?
Oh, my word. Ignore me.
They know God.
They ignored me. Okay. They ignored God. Okay? This, now what about Jeremiah 11 to 13? Who are we talking about?
Listen.
Who?
Listen.
What's it say?
It says, has any nation even traded God?
Has any nation ever traded their gods?
Yes.
You are representing the wrong God. You're my priest and you're representing that one? Has this ever? This is crazy. Okay, keep going.
Exchange their glories for worthless idols.
They exchanged something valuable for something worthless.
Yes.
And then?
They that
Forsake God.
Say it again, Elsie.
Forsake God.
Who forsake God?
The Israelites.
My people.
Yeah.
It says my people. My people forsook me. My people betrayed me. My people gave up on me. My people turned away from me. And who are they betraying? Who are they forsaking? God describes himself as what?
Glorious.
Glorious God and
Was less evident.
traded for the worst. Keep going. Keep reading.
Fountain of living water.
I'm a fountain of living water. I'm like a well that just keeps giving water and life and refreshing. And you traded that for what? You traded it for something that is worthless. And he describes it as, you decided I will dig for myself a hole in the ground and wait for water to come and fill it up. It's going to be muddy. It's going to leak. It's not going to help much. And they say, you said, I don't need you. I'll do it myself. Jeremiah 2 verse 30 and 32 says, does a young woman forget her jewelry? Does a bride hide her wedding dress? Like, this is silly. And yet my people have forgotten me. They've forsaken me. Chapters 3 and 4 of Jeremiah are full of family imagery. You're going to hear a husband mourning for an adulterous wife, a wife who has given herself to someone else. You're going to hear about a family that has been ruined by prostitution, and a father crying out to his children saying, come back, come home. Chapter 3, it says over and over again. In 3:1, 3:12, 3:14, 3:22, come back to me, come back to me, come home to me, come back to me. Now I want to read Jeremiah 3, 19 to 20.
I thought to myself, I would love to treat you as my own children. I wanted nothing more than to give you this beautiful land, the finest possession in the world. I look forward to your calling me Father, and I wanted you never to turn from me. But you have been unfaithful to me, you people of Israel. You have been like a faithless wife who leaves her husband. I, the Lord, have spoken.
What emotion do you notice as you read this? Can you hear the pain in God's heart? Can you hear the pain in his voice? He's not talking about a stranger. He's not talking about what happened in Australia. He's talking about the one that he has committed himself to, his bride, his wife, his children, the ones he has the closest, most intimate relationship with, have betrayed him, have abandoned him, have given themselves to other. And the brokenhearted, we see the broken heart of God. Jeremiah chapter, so I mean, his response, of course we know he should be angry. He should. But Jeremiah 4 says, Israel, come back to me. If you'll throw away your detestable idols and go astray no more, if you'll swear by my name alone and begin to live good, honest lives, uphold justice, then you'll be a blessing to the nations, and the people will come and they'll praise my name. You'll look different. If you live the way I made you to, you'll look different, and it'll be so beautiful and attractive. You just look like everyone else. Intimacy, partnership, relationship, not slavery. In these books, we get a glimpse of God's heart, and it's coming through human messengers. So Jeremiah, this is a book of great emotion. As you look at it and you listen to it, what's interesting, so he's going to use things like, he's going to say, my heart, I writhe in pain. This is like, I hurt, my whole body hurts. My grief is beyond healing. My heart is broken. I'm like a fountain of tears that would weep forever. This like emotion and pain coming out. What's interesting, this last one, night and day, my eyes overflow with tears. I cannot stop weeping. What's happening in this book is the emotions of the prophet and the emotions of God are mixing. This last one is actually God speaking. So Jeremiah is talking about all this emotion and pain, and God's doing it, and sometimes it's not even clear. Is this God's pain? Is this Jeremiah's pain? We know that Jeremiah is affected by God's heart. His emotions are affected by what's happening. What happens when we allow ourselves to be affected by the things that move God's heart? Where the things that are important to him become important to us. The things that make him heartbroken break our hearts. What happens when our response aligns with his response? And in this book, we're going to find that the cost of this lifestyle. When we say, I choose to be a willing partner, I choose to work with you, and God begins to give us an understanding of who he is and how he sees things, and it breaks us, and it starts to change how we behave. It starts to change what we value, what becomes most important to us. But this is going to cost Jeremiah everything. He's going to surrender all of his life plans. God says, I formed you, I knew you, I made you, I called you for this. And in that moment, Jeremiah is going to decide, will I follow my own path, the path of my culture, the path of my family, or am I going to follow Yahweh? And when he follows Yahweh, he's going to sacrifice and give up so much. He's going to be giving these messages to Israel, and Israel doesn't want to hear it. They're going to mock him. They're going to spite him. They're going to shame him, disrespect him, ignore him. They're going to turn, even his own family turns against him. God warns him about his family. He says, your brothers are plotting against you. Don't listen to them. He's going to be beaten and imprisoned multiple times. He's going to be put in stocks. He's going to be publicly shamed. He's going to be thrown into a well. He's not allowed to marry and have children. He's kidnapped and taken to Israel. And through all of this, Jeremiah says, I can't stop speaking these words. They're like fire in me. If I stop, I just get burned up. I have to speak what God said. And not only does it like consume him, God says, if you don't speak these words, I hold you accountable. If you don't warn them, if you don't tell them what I say, I hold their blood on your hand. Jeremiah is like, he's not free to be God. Jeremiah is not able to do what he wants. He's come to a place of submission before God to say, I will be a willing servant for you. And in the process, he's going to give it all. Jeremiah doesn't give up. Through this entire ministry, through all these difficulties, we see this faithfulness and this tenacity and this perseverance and a commitment to God and the ways of God, though it is so, so difficult. He continues to trust God. He continues to surrender to God. And what's interesting is when we read Jeremiah, the entire book and all these prophets, all of these books are about people who said no to God. And when we read these prophets, there are a few people that said, yes, here am I. I'm available. I'm willing to pay the price. I'm willing to represent you rightly in the world. And we're to see this contrast between a faithful Jeremiah and an unfaithful sister, brother, wife, sibling, child. We're going to take a break in just a moment. But what I'd like to do just before the break is just take a couple minutes to reflect on these things we're hearing. Are there any spaces in your life where you have tried to follow the culture around you and just do what they do and love what they love, and you've forgotten your design, you've forgotten what God has created you for, you've forgotten your story? Are there places where you have didn't ask God, you forsook God, you turned against God, you ignored God? Are there any places in your life where you followed in the footsteps of the Israelites? Have you given your attention and affections to other things? Or maybe, like Jeremiah, you've given yourselves to the purposes of God, and you just realize that life is hard. Ministry is hard. Following Jesus costs you something, and it's not always easy. Everyone around you doesn't understand you. They don't support you. They don't celebrate your choice to love and honor God. Even family plot against you. Can we just take a few minutes to respond to God? If you want to write something down, or if you just need to say a prayer, just creates space.
Yes, God, I want to respond to you. This is, yeah, thank you, Lord, for these books and yeah, these people, Lord, that I realize, yeah, following you, yeah, not deceive. Yeah, every time I give up on this, it's because of yeah difficulties or because facing at my God. Yeah, thank you for not give up on me, Lord. The, your purpose, for your purpose in your plan, Lord Jesus. Thank you for this book, Jeremiah, Lord. How he made a decision to choose you, Lord. He's by not choosing the world and not looking at what happens in the world, Lord. But yeah, I want to ask you this, Lord, this is that every time, Lord, I questioning you and asking you why this happened, what that happened, Lord. Because of the prideful I have this is I want to see how is praises, Lord, your plan, Lord, this is the purpose, Lord.
Father, I forget so quickly and so often your faithfulness and your goodness. I'm so quick to rely on myself. I'm so quick to think only of what I want or what's best for me in the moment. God, even as a leader, there's times where I don't even think to ask you for your perspective or your help. I just share from experience, or I think I know enough. But I ask that you give me and give us grace to be those that would rely on you, seek you, ask you for help, ask for your perspective, listen to you. But it is costly. Maybe that's why it's so hard. We don't want to be made fun of. We don't want to be disrespected. We don't want to be dismissed by others. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. God, would you give us courage to do what is right, even if others don't understand, if others won't follow this way. We need you. And we want you. We want to learn, and we want to obey, and we want to give ourselves all of our heart, soul, strength. We want to. We need your help. go ahead and take our break now. We'll come back to more.
You let Elsie move to 10:45.
We'll come back in about 10 minutes. Yeah, Rufus and Elsie, 10:45. Rufus, Elsie.
Rosak ke? Ini rosak.
Did you get the file I sent you, JPEG, Zephaniah? Okay, we're going to use that a little bit later on. So send it. And I also have notes for you. I forgot to send yesterday, so I'll send you this afternoon. We'll send you all the notes for the last couple of days. Okay. So Jeremiah has these emotional poems and symbolic acts, and he does these things, and he's talking about his tears overflowing like a fountain and his heart breaking, and he's writhing, and he's very emotional. In Asli culture, how do you show emotion?
What culture, believer culture or non-believer? If non-believer, they have emotion, you already pass away the next day.
As in, so not showing emotion?
No, they did sometimes. What
Not
emotion
often.
do you mean?
Any emotion.
The
Strong
other,
emotion.
God.
Strong emotion.
Yes.
How do you show it? So you're very sad, you're very hurt, your heart is broken, your
If
wife
for-
has
I
betrayed you.
think for men, most of them, if they want to show emotion, is the drunk.
They only drink.
Yeah.
So emotion is not,
Express.
it's in, not out.
Not out, it's all in.
In. And
if
women
to-
also?
A woman, they will go to the friend lah, and they like
And then talk.
talk until membawang sometimes.
Is it same in Sabah?
Almost same because they are shown by drinking, and then sometimes when they drink drunk already, they show their anger.
Yeah, only if
So
they
anger, okay.
if they have if they drunk already, then they will show you like the emotion. Like my brother, that he will cry in front of you and share everything.
So when they're drunk, their emotion will come out, but if
Yes.
not,
No.
when do you see your father cry?
I realized that I can't remember because he passed away and I was 10, so I
Okay,
can't
so you don't remember that. Anyone else? When do you see your father cry?
A lot. Spoke to him that night. When he's praying, like always something struggle. He
So you'd see some emotion
Yeah.
certain times.
Yeah.
Okay. Rufus, what about culture in Singapore? When do people express their emotion?
Depends. Depends on the person, I guess. But usually they express it when they are super down and they got no other option. Usually they put on a mask. They don't usually share things unless you are very close with them.
Okay. So if you're very close, you might see some. And then like, how is it expressed? So if you have, if something really difficult has happened, how is the emotion expressed?
They either rage or they cry.
Yeah. Is crying common in Singapore?
No. Unless, like I said, people usually put on a mask.
Okay. Elsie, what about KK, Sabah?
I'm actually not Sabahan, but what I observe is the women's and ladies are more easily they express their emotions.
Yeah.
But as for the men, no, because it's for them it's like a sign of weakness. Yeah.
Sure.
So as for my own family, because I come from mixture Chinese Indian, I see my own family Chinese. They don't express their emotions. They just suppress it. Yeah.
Okay.
Even though things are not right, they will not open their mouth and say it because, the shame and also, all kind of thing goes on in the Chinese culture. Yeah.
Sure. So then, thank you. What about the church? Like when you come into the church, now do you have freedom to express your emotion? Guys, women, men, does everyone have option to express now in the church?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so here's a question. In the emotion in the church, is it always the good emotion? Oh God, you're so bad. Or do you also see anger in the church? Do you
Yes.
also see
Yes.
crying in the
Yes.
church?
Yes.
You also see?
mixture of
Mix.
emotion.
Yeah?
Yeah, anger, rebellions in the church also.
They want to hear up.
Sorry?
If they don't like the sermon, they're going up.
They go out and then say something like that?
No, they sit on the bed.
Mhm. So have you been taught in the church or in your culture how to deal with strong emotions in a healthy way?
No.
Because I'm hearing alcohol is quite common. Rufus is talking about putting on a mask and you just kind of keep it in. Women maybe talk to friends and other people, but generally speaking, many cultures do not allow us to express emotion in a healthy way.
Yes.
We are expected to just keep it in, keep it in, keep it in, right?
Yes.
So it's not just my culture. So what's interesting is actually the Bible gives us permission to have and express very strong emotion. We just don't always think of it this way. A lot of the Psalms are these strong emotional reactions to what's going on. One of my favorite, David is essentially saying, God, you have betrayed me. You have abandoned me. I thought you were good, but I guess you're not. And it's this like accusation of God and this emotional which at least when I was young, I was not allowed to do. You can never accuse God. You can never think God is bad. Of course, he's always good. But actually, if we're honest, we do accuse God. We do think God is not good. We do think his plans aren't good. So we got my plans for you are good. And then you say, yeah, but what about my father? What about my brother? What about the situation? Oh, sorry. Yes, God, you are always good. And we put on a mask, but inside, the Bible gives us permission to have these emotions. It's almost like one person described prayer as like ripping open our chest so God could see what's inside. Are we allowed to show God what's really inside? The answer is yes.
Yes.
And the way can learn to do this is called a lament. A lament is a style of expression. It's this outpouring of what's inside, intensity. It's poetic literature, but it's very emotional. And there's a variety of places in the Bible. But for now, we're going to watch a quick video about the book of Lamentations. So Lamentations is an entire book of the author ripping open their chest and letting what's inside come out. The book of Lamentations.
The Book of Lamentations. It's a unique book in the Old Testament that contains 5 poems from an anonymous author who survived and is now reflecting back on the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem and the destruction and exile that followed. Remember the whole story from the book of 2 Kings. The fall of Jerusalem and the exile was the most horrendous catastrophe in Israel's history up to this point. So remember, God had promised Abraham the land. He'd given David victory to make Jerusalem Israel's capital. And from David came the royal line of kings. You had God's presence there in the temple. That's where the priests maintained the rituals of Israel's worship. And after 500 years of all of this history, in the summer of 587 BC, the city fell to Babylon. It was all decimated and gone. And so the Book of Lamentations is a memorial to the pain and confusion of the Israelites that followed this destruction. Now, the lament poems found here are not unique in the Bible. There's lots of them in the book of Psalms. And these biblical poems of lament, they do a number of things. They're a form of protest. They're a way of drawing everybody's attention, including God's attention, to the horrible things that happen in this world that should not be tolerated. they're a way of processing emotion. So in these poems, God's people vent their anger and dismay at the ruin caused by people's sin and selfishness. And these poems are a place to voice confusion. Suffering makes us ask questions about God's character and promises, and none of this is looked down on in the Bible. Just the opposite. These poems of lament give a sacred dignity to human suffering. And so these human words of grief that are addressed to God have now become part of God's word to his people. The design of these 5 poems is very intentional. It's part of the book's message. So chapters 1 through 4 are called acrostics, which means alphabet poems. Each poetic verse begins with a new letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is made up of 22 letters. Now, this very ordered and linear structure is in stark contrast to the disorder of the pain and the confused grief that's explored in these poems. So it's like Israel's suffering is explored A to Z and is trying to express something that is inexpressible. Chapters 1 and 2 each have 1 verse per letter, giving them a really similar design, but the themes are very different. So chapter 1 focuses on the grief and shame of a figure called Lady Zion. The poet personifies the city of Jerusalem as a widow, also called the daughter of God. And she sits alone. She's bereaved of her loved ones, devastated. No one comes to comfort. It's a very powerful metaphor. And then Lady Zion speaks. She calls on the Lord to notice her fate. And through this image, the poet, he's showing that the city's destruction brought a level of psychological trauma on the Israelites that can only be expressed as the experience of a funeral and the death of a loved one. Chapter 2 focuses on the fall of Jerusalem and how it was a consequence of Israel's sin and was brought about by God's wrath, which is a key word in this poem. Now, it's important to remember that in the Bible, God's wrath is not spontaneous, volatile anger. The biblical poets and prophets, they use this word to talk about God's justice. So Israel had entered a covenant agreement with God, and for centuries they've been violating it by worshiping other gods, perpetrating injustice, oppressing the poor. And so, yes, God is slow to anger, but he eventually does get angry at human evil, and he will bring his just anger in the form of punishment. In the case of Jerusalem, this involved allowing Babylon to become a city. And so this poem is acknowledging that God's wrath is justified, but this doesn't keep the poet from lamenting and asking God to show compassion once again. Chapter 3 breaks this design pattern by having 3 verses per letter, so it's the longest poem in the book. And the voice is that of a lonely man speaking out of his suffering and grief as a representative of the whole people. What's interesting is that this chapter is full of language that's drawn from other parts of the Old Testament, from the laments of Job and from other important lament psalms, and even from the suffering servant poems in Isaiah. And the poet sees his hardship as a form of God's justice, like chapter 2 said. But paradoxically, this is what gives the poet hope. And it leads him to offer the only hopeful words in the book. Because of the Lord's covenant faithfulness, we do not perish. His mercies never fail. They're new every morning. How great is your faithfulness, O God. So I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will put my hope in him. So the poet reasons, if God is consistent enough to bring his justice on humanity, then he'll also be consistent with his covenant promise to not allow evil to get the final word. And so for this poet, God's judgment is the seedbed of hope. Chapter 4 goes back to the same alphabet structure as chapters 1 and 2. It is a vivid and disturbing depiction of the 2-year siege of Jerusalem. And it contrasts how things used to be in Jerusalem of the past and how terrible they became in the siege. So children used to laugh and play in the streets, but now they beg for food. The wealthy used to eat lavish meals, but now they eat whatever they can find in the dirt. And the royal leaders used to be full of splendor, but now they're famished and dirty and unrecognizable. And the anointed king from the line of David has been captured and dragged away. So the poem's power comes from the shock of these contrasts, and it's exploring the depth of the suffering that Israel brought on itself. Now, the final poem is unique because it breaks the design pattern. It's the same length as all of the other alphabet poems, but the alphabet order is gone. It's like the poet can't hold it together anymore, and his grief has exploded back into chaos. The poem is a communal prayer for God's mercy. Israel begs God not to ignore their suffering or abandon. And the poem offers a long list of all of the different kinds of people who were devastated by the fall of the city. They ask God not to forget these people. and they lament on behalf of others, giving voice to their pain. Suffering in silence is just not a virtue in this book. God's people are not asked to deny their emotions, but voice their protests, to vent their feelings, and pour it all out. The book ends with something of a paradox. The poet acknowledges that God is the eternal king of the world, but also that Israel's circumstances make them feel like God is nowhere to be found. And so the final words of the book leave this tension totally unresolved. It asks, unless you've totally rejected us, and the book ends. The poet doesn't offer a nice, neat conclusion, much like our own experiences of pain and suffering. The story of the Bible doesn't end here, but this very important book shows us how lament and prayer and grief are a crucial part of the journey of faith of God's people in a broken world. That's what the book of Lamentations is all about.
So go ahead and take the next couple minutes and write down some things that you learned, questions you have, or what do you want to remember from this overview of Lamentations? Who can share something they learned through this video? A memorial of pain and confusion. Excellent. And this book is written about something that happened. What happened? What was the event they're writing about? They're being sieged and Jerusalem is going to fall. So this collection of poems is written about a conquering empire coming and surrounding the city, starving the city until the people gave up and said, we submit, and then the city is destroyed. So it's one event in history that the writer is writing about. All right, Nima, what stood out to you in the video? That we can lament on behalf of others. Great. Very good. Chapter 5 really looks at that. Yeah. Clarita? Still thinking?
Yeah.
No problem. Asway. What in the video? What stood out to you?
Lord mercy.
God's mercy. It didn't destroy them. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw same as this one word, one sentence. Lamentation is that lament behalf of others.
Yes.
Yeah, as a Jeremiah.
Yes. But he's not just lamenting on behalf of others. He's a citizen of the city.
Inside.
The whole city is gone. He feels the pain. Everything he knows is gone. So not just their pain, it's also my pain.
I just have a question.
What's your question?
Yeah. So when God says he forsake them,
Yes.
is he really forsake them, or he's still walking behind them?
Great question. Yes. Larita's question was, when God said he forsook them, did he actually forsake them or not? And this is a really important question. And as you read the prophets, that you're going to see there's times where he said, I will forsake you. And then other times it's the writer saying, God, you forsook us. So really, really good question. We'll come back to it, okay? I'm just going to put a note so we can explore this later. Good job, Lolita. Any other question? I realized we didn't get the subtitles on, so I'll fix that for other videos. We make sure we get the subtitles, easier to understand. So I don't want to go into all the detail, but just a quick overview summary that this is a space for us to express our emotion, our strong emotion, deep sorrow. And it is a place for us to be able to ask important questions of God and be able to say, I don't understand. I don't like this. It's a form of protest. So think of like fist pointed at God or finger pointed at God and confusion, emotion, all these things.
Chat.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Because some leaders, they will say that, it's wrong for us to be angry with God and, express our emotions with God and all that. So, but I always do that with God. But when I share with some leaders, they say, no, it's wrong. You cannot do such things.
So this is what I'm a pastor's son. So in that sense, I'm very familiar with church culture. I have been in Malaysia a long time, so I know some things about Malaysian culture. And I also recognize I'm not Malaysian. I think, this is my personal opinion, I think church culture has told us what we can and cannot do, but I don't think always what we're taught is rooted in scripture. When you look at King David, you read through the Psalms, they are questioning God's goodness. There are laments where they're saying, God, what have you done? It's an accusation, it's confusion. So, of course, we know that God is good. We know in our head that God can be trusted, but we feel different. So the information says God will never do wrong, and then my son dies. It feels like God could have stepped in and done something and he didn't, so are you really good? And I think the laments give us permission to ask God these important questions, because really they're inside us. We're already asking them, but our culture says, put on a mask, look good. And in the church, it's this like, God is good all the time. God has given and he has taken away. But actually, that's not how we feel. We feel, God, you're not good. So Psalms 139, the psalmist says, you are familiar with all of my ways. You know my thoughts from far away. So if he already knows my emotion, me putting on a mask and saying, God is good, when inside I'm saying, God, I don't know if I can trust you, it's religion. It's just a face. It's not real. And I think Lamentations and these Psalms of Lament are giving us permission to be real with God and honest with God. And what we're going to explore just after this is in a book of the prophet, where this prophet is pointing his finger at God and saying, you're not good. So I'll say my response to that would say, I would call that religion. I would call that a misunderstanding of, yes, we want to honor God. Yes, we want to worship and love, and of course. But to pretend that we are other, to pretend that it's okay when we're not, there's a time and a place. Do we stand up in front of church and accuse God in front of everyone? That's maybe not the best place, but can we, in appropriate ways, express our lament and our confusion and our emotion? I think so. I think these even the things we're reading today are giving us permission and also expressions. Lamentations, the key verse, the person who's in the midst of this emotional pain is remembering back, remembering God's character, remembering who God has been in the past. The faithful love of God doesn't end. It feels like everything is gone, everything's wrong, but I choose to put my hope in God. That's the key message of the book of Lamentations. Who is this book for? The exiles. Yes, it's giving voice to the exiles and their pain and confusion, right? And it's written just after the city fell, just after they are exiled out. And the person who wrote it is? We don't know for sure. A lot of people think it's Jeremiah because the writing style is similar. It happened at the same time. So we don't know for sure, but Jeremiah is quite possibly the author. 2006 in Penang. Nicole and I are both in bed reading books. And my hair on the back of my neck goes ding, and like have this really strange sensation, and I feel like God is communicating with me. And I like stop and I was like, God is speaking. And I look over at Nicole and she turns and looks at me and we both have these big eyes. And I said, I feel like God just told me something. And she said, me too. And it was, we haven't had many of those times, but we felt like God spoke this very, very clear message to us. And it had to do with us being in Malaysia. At that time, we had been here 10 years already, but it was a change of our focus, a change of what we were to do. And it was so clear. So we took it to our leaders, we took it to our team members, we took it to the people praying for us, and we said, we feel like God is asking us to do something different. What do you think? Pray with us. And everyone around us said yes. We prayed, we asked God for direction, we started moving in this, and then our son was born, our first one. And we wanted to take him back to North America to introduce him to family. So we planned a 3-month rest, and then we'll start this new ministry expression in Malaysia God has for us, that he spoke to us. So we took our son back to US and Canada, and Canadian immigration or US immigration would not let my wife into the US. They locked her out. And our 3-month visit to the US turned into 8 years of being locked out of Malaysia. So God just spoke and said, go do this thing. And we said, yes, Lord, we'll obey. And then everything started going wrong. And it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 30. For me, in that time, I went from being like a YWAM leader, a missionary, a teacher, to I have no job. No one knows who I am. No one cares who I am. No one wants to listen to me teach because they don't know me. No one wants to listen to me lead because they don't know me. I don't have any support coming in because we're not missionaries in Malaysia. I have no education because I've been here since I was a teenager. The church that I was a part of broke and split. So even the church that was covering me, my family, my parents were in Nepal, and my entire world started coming apart. And the only thing I could do was hold on to God and say, God, you told me to go to Malaysia. So I did everything possible to get back, but the door was locked. There's no way to get back. And for 4 years, I beat on this door trying to get back into Malaysia, and I couldn't get back. And then I went into very intense depression. So much, I was on medication. I was seeing counselors, therapists, and even my own siblings who I have deep relationship with said, now we cannot be with you because you're so miserable. Your life is so, it's just hard to be with you. Everything is bad and sad, and I just like fell. I didn't fall into sin, but just like emotionally, I came apart. Everything that I had given my last 10 years of my life to had just broken. And then I was trying to be obedient and I couldn't make it happen, and I didn't understand. And so my emotion said, God, you called me to do this thing, and then you could let me into the country. Why won't you? And then as it got worse and worse and worse, I began to act like, God, was that you? Did you really speak? Does God speak? Am I crazy? Everyone around me in the culture is going this way, and I went this way, and now I have no money, no education. I don't have, what am I going to do if I can't? And it was the most difficult time of my life. So painful. And 4 years turned into 8 years. And by the time 8 years went, I gave up on Malaysia. I said, I wanted to love, I wanted to be there. You just, okay, but I got rid of it, and I pushed it away. And then after 8 years, God just spoke one day, totally unexpected. He said, go back to Malaysia. And like made it possible for us to come back. I was so confused. What just happened for all of that time? I was available, I was ready, I was here. What happened? And during that time, my faith was really tested, and it wasn't good. Like I was working with people, and they say, are you a Christian? And I'd be like, I grew up in the church. I didn't have this love of God coming out of me. I had questions and hurt and accusation, and I grew up in a space where that wasn't, like Elsie, I wasn't pastor's kid. You have to look good. You have to have the good presentation. What the community thinks is so important. And so I think in that season, God kind of took some of these layers of religion off of me and just said, are you able to be who you are? And will you open up your chest and just let this pain and this frustration, this disappointment out? Will you? And I think the result is my relationship with God is deeper, and it is more real, not so religious, not so masks and pretend. But I think these laments give us a tool to do this. So you look back at my journals, and they are just like, God, I thought you said that I was supposed to do this, and then you abandoned me. Where are you? You read them, it's not pretty. It's not beautiful. But actually, I think it's the same with the Psalms. A lot of the Psalms, David reminds himself, God, last time God was like this, but now he's not. What will he be like in the future? And it's like he's trying to decide my emotion or who God says he is. It's not irreverent to be honest with God. It's not, I think it's biblical. I think the Bible gives us permission to do this. Weep and cry and scream and groan and writhe. I think we're given permission for this. All right, a little bit of a downer, but I'd like you now, if you have a piece of art, well, I'd like you to pull it out. We asked everyone to create something beautiful, like in memory of what God had made. Did you guys make it?
Yes.
Come on, let's get it out. Let's see it. This is what I made. Actually, my wife made most of it.
This one is my beautiful thing that I made.
Yeah, no way, man. Show me your art.
This one, this one is DIY. Yeah,
Good job.
I'm doing DIY actually.
Nope, no DIY. I need to see this one.
Because I think I have misunderstood.
I think you did.
Yeah.
Where's yours?
My art.
Bukan, bukan.
Yes.
Marita?
How about this?
Okay.
Oh, no.
You didn't just make that, did you?
Anjing.
Anjing. Anjing. Okay, where's yours?
She made
Who did?
that one. She made
You made this one. Tell us what this is.
love, but it doesn't.
Supposed to be
Doesn't
a heart shape.
Heart shape.
Heart shape. So we got some love.
Also
We have an anjing. We have a picture of something.
Yes, you
Oh
do.
no.
Rufus, did you make something?
Tak,
Yeah,
saya
one
punya.
No, sorry, I forgot.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Elsie?
I only have the beautiful things.
It's a stone I picked up while I was taking a walk, and this stone catch my attention. It looks like a shoe.
Okay.
So when you told to do something, I was cracking my head what to do. So suddenly I remembered my stone. So last night I painted this, and then I put a Bible verse there, Zechariah 4:10. And then
What does Zechariah 4:10 say?
do not despise the small beginning. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
small steps.
Small steps. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
This is one.
What else do we have?
Yesterday.
Done.
Can lah.
All right. So next time when you get your boss says, make something beautiful, please do it.
Yeah, I do it, but not yeah, the communication tak sama.
Okay. So what I need you to do is, Larita, I need you to give this away. You need to give this to someone. You
Signing up
need
with
to
it?
give this to someone. You need to give this to someone. So I want you to, as an act of love, I want you to bless someone with something else.
It's something else.
So if you want to give your earrings away, you can do that also. Your choice.
My heart is hurt.
So
You have to give that away. So you have to choose someone you give it to.
I don't know how.
Anyone.
Anyone.
Yep. Give it away.
Go ahead, Baki.
Oh yeah, Kyler. He loves puppies. All right, so Zam, yours went to Larita. Larita went to Kai. What about the heart? Heart went to Esther. Okay, so what we've done is we made something beautiful and we gave it away.
Yes. No.
So now you receive something beautiful. What is your response?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Kyler, what is your response? Thank you. Good job. Larita? Wow. Good job. Wow. Okay. So then do you just like put it in a book and put it away and then that's that? So you put it somewhere where you can see the beauty, appreciate it. Good job. Okay. What I need Kai Kai and Larita and Esther to come to the front. Bring your creation with you. So this is what you made, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry. This was made and you received it, right? Okay. This is what I need you to do. I need you to destroy it.
Oh my.
Destroy it. Crumple it, just like, and I got a rubbish here. So crumple it up, throw it away. Okay. Megasi. Okay, Zam, your painting is in pieces in the rubbish. How does it feel?
Rejected limitation.
Limited. Biblical approach. Lament. Okay? Arita, you made this beautiful dog. And now, Kyler undid it, crumple it. How do you feel?
I still have enough.
Your heart. Nima, your heart.
Yeah,
Grit, how does it feel?
because I spent time making it. I tried a lot of times. I don't know at first, but then it's like,
How do you
I
feel?
had time.
How do you feel?
Okay.
You feel bad.
Yeah.
You spent time making it. You try hard. You want to make it beautiful. If you have more time, it would be so amazing. And now she just took it and finished already. How do you feel?
I ate.
Suck it. That's good. Yahweh designed this beautiful space for us. Makes us as a reflection of who he is, gives us responsibility to care for it. Fill the wasteland with the beauty of the garden, order, abundant structure. The message of the prophets is essentially saying, this is what you've done with what God made for you. He made you to be his rulers, to be his partners, to have intimate relationship. He made all this beautiful space for you. And what have you done with it? You've ruined it. You've destroyed it. You've abused it. You've neglected it. It's an emotional message. It shakes people out of their indifference. You see this and you're like, it's not okay. I made that. You should not have ruined it. We should feel like that. As we read the prophets, we should feel that's not acceptable. That's not okay. That is disrespectful. It's dishonoring. It is not how we're supposed to receive the gift that he made for us. Do we love and honor and appreciate our Maker? Or do we treat our Maker? Oh yeah, thanks. What have we done with the world around us? What have we done with this space he made for us? What have we done with our own bodies? How do we treat the people around us? So far, this entire story and the story of humanity is of people treating our Maker and all he's made like rubbish. The prophets tell us that we're invited into this covenant relationship, this partnership. It's a blessing. It's an opportunity to live fully. And the people said, no thanks, I want to look like everyone else. They destroyed one another. They filled the land with violence and corruption and injustice and slavery and abuse and neglect. And these are the people that are supposed to look there. The chaos of the wilderness has taken over the garden. The beauty of the garden is overshadowed by the waste of the wasteland. The prophets are going to use language, these late prophets, Zephaniah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, they're going to use words that it's like the undoing of creation. Creation is moving backwards from beauty back into chaos, from life and vegetation and flourishing into desert sand, waste. They've failed to be image bearers. Jeremiah chapter 4. This is some of the language that the prophets are going to use. 4:23 says, I looked at the earth and it was empty and formless. What does that remind you of? Creation, right? I looked at the heavens and there was no light. I looked at the mountains and hills and they trembled and shook. I looked at the people and they were gone. The birds of the sky had flown away. The fertile fields had become wilderness. The cities lay in ruins, crushed by the Lord's anger. You have turned creation backwards. And all the way through the book of Jeremiah, we've got some verses here. These are all talking about desolation, empty of life. There's no more cattle. There's no more crops. Birds gone, cities ruined, drought. Those who trust in humans and turn away from the Lord are cursed. They're like a shrub in the desert that has no life. There's no water. The land will become desolate. This will become a monument to your stupidity. So Jeremiah 18. Jeremiah 23 says, the land is in mourning. It's dried up because of the prophets who did evil and the leaders who abused their power. So here's the question. That's pretty strong imagery. We're turning creation against. How are they doing? As you've read through the book of Jeremiah, think about some specific actions that people have done that are exact opposite of what God wants. Again, think about Marduk and the Babylonian creation story, and think about Yahweh and the Israelite creation story. Which one does Israel look more like? But how are they doing? What are they doing?
The one that's
Opposite of Yahweh. Good job. What are they doing? This list, I erased it too soon. The list that's up here, think about what these people are doing. Sorry? Worshipping Baal. Yes. So they're trusting other lesser deities for rain. So they're saying, I won't trust the maker. I'm going to trust this local something to get my crops. Good. What else?
They ignore God.
They ignored God, but what did they do instead?
They worship other gods instead.
So they worshipped other gods. Good. They ignored God, worshiped other gods. What else did they do?
Sacrifice.
So they're sacrificing the most vulnerable, weak, helpless people in their communities. They're sacrificing them for what? For their own benefit. I will give up this weak one so that I can get more crops, so I can have more children, so I can get more of what I want. I will sacrifice the vulnerable for my personal benefit. Does that remind you of anything in our society? Do we do this today? Do we sacrifice the vulnerable for our own benefit? Abortion is an example, yes, but not only abortion. How a society treats the most vulnerable members of society. Think about the handicapped, those that are not physically capable of doing. How do we treat them? How do we treat the older generation who are not physically capable? Do we have honor and value? How do we treat those that are sick? How do we treat those that don't have as much intelligence as we do?
Homeless.
How do we treat the poor? Exactly. So another thing Israel is going to do is they're going to look at other nations like they did with Assyria, Manasseh and Assyria. He's going to say, Assyria, I want your help. And what's crazy, in Jeremiah 2, Israel is going to Egypt for help. Why is that weird? Why is it funny that Israel would go to Egypt for help? Think about Israel's history. Yes! God has already shown that Egypt's gods are powerless. He's so much more powerful. Why would you go back to those gods? And not only that, Egypt enslaved you for 400 years. Why would you go back to them and say, could you help me? They've already proved they'll use you. They'll abuse you. They'll take from you. They don't care about you. Why would you look to Egypt for help? Someone read Jeremiah 5:28.
not limit to their wicked deeds, or refuse to provide justice to the orphan and deny the right of the poor.
Okay, say it again, Larita. Nice and loud.
They are fed and slave, and there is no limit to their wicked deeds. They refuse to provide justice to orphans and deny the right of the poor.
They refuse to provide justice for orphans. They deny the rights of the poor, and they are great and well fed and well dressed. Who do they care about? They only care about themselves. As long as I look good, as long as I eat good, as long as people think that I'm good, who cares about all of you? Who's doing this? My people. Throughout Jeremiah, he's going to call the leaders. The leaders are like this. The prophets are like this. The priests are like this. The institutions are corrupt. They're becoming rich and great and well-fed on the backs of the vulnerable, denying the rights of the poor. Social justice. God cares about it. In 5 verse 30, a horrible and shocking thing has happened. The prophets give false prophecies and the priest rule with an iron hand. And worse yet, my people like it that way. Corruption of not just political office, but also spiritual office. Chapter 7, verse 6. What does Jeremiah 7:6 say?
Only if you stop exploiting foreigners, orphans, and widows, only if you stop your murdering, and only if you stop harming yourself by worshipping idols.
Stop exploiting foreigners. Stop abusing orphans and widows. Stop murdering. 17 verse 11 talks about gaining wealth through unjust means. Like a bird that hatches eggs that she has not laid, so are those who get wealth by unjust means. Sooner or later, they'll lose their riches. Look at Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 13. Jeremiah 22:13. What's it say?
And the Lord says, what sorrow awaits Jehoiakim, who builds his palace with forced labor, he builds injustice into its walls. For he makes his neighbors work for nothing, he does not pay them for their labor.
He builds his palace through slave labor. He does not pay them for their work. He is building injustice into the fabric of his own palace. And verse 17 says, you're full of selfish greed and dishonesty. You murder the innocent, you oppress the poor, and you reign ruthlessly. Jeremiah 17, verse 21. Someone read that, please. Let's do 21 to 23.
This is what the Lord says. Listen to my warning. Stop carrying on your trade at Jerusalem's gate on the Sabbath day. Do not do your work on the Sabbath, but make it a holy day. I gave this command to your ancestors, but they did not listen or obey. They stubbornly refused to pay attention or accept my discipline.
Why were the people working on the Sabbath?
To earn money.
To get money. Why were people working on the Sabbath?
They want to get more.
To get more money. Why did God ask the people of Israel to take a Sabbath? Rest, remember, what else? Remember what?
What
Remember God. Absolutely. There's something really powerful about Sabbath. What happens when we stop and we remember? We start to appreciate what we have. Yes, excellent. Gratitude, thankfulness. You can actually enjoy what you have. When the people say, I will work through the Sabbath, that means every day I'm trying to get more and more and more. When is enough? When do you have enough? When have you got enough wealth? When have you got enough toys, material possessions? When have you got enough influence? When did you get enough? And not only that, who are you trusting when you do this all the time? Trusting yourself. The Sabbath stops us to remember, I need God. I need his strength. I need his wisdom. I need to know how he designed me to be. Oh yeah, I work, but I need to partner with God. And the Israelites have completely stopped doing this. So again, sometimes we think of this only in spiritual terms, that they're ignoring God, they're worshiping other idols, but actually, they are not paying people properly for work. They're treating people like slaves. They're abusing the vulnerable in society. They're using other vulnerable people to make themselves better. Does this happen in today's world?
Yes.
Tell me an example in today's world where this happens.
Foreigner work in our country, we don't pay them here. We treated them well.
He didn't even receive money.
Maids. Maids are abused. They come to the country to work and they are abused. They are not appreciated. They are not honored. They are not cared for. They are looked down on. We steal their passports. We lock them in a room so that they can't leave the room. We take away their phone so they can't call for help. You come here and you make my house clean because I'm better than you. You're from the Philippines. You're from Myanmar. You're from Indonesia. And I'm Malaysian and I can tell you what to do. I have a friend right now. We've been working with her for 5 years to get her back to her home country. Because the first family took her passport, locked her in a room for 3 months. They only gave her 1 bowl of rice a day for 3 months, and she ran away. What happens when she runs away? She lives on the street. What happens when the police pick her up? She's illegal. Even though she came legally to work, she doesn't have passport, she doesn't have paperwork, she gets thrown in detention, and it's on and on, injustice and injustice. Police say, you pay me, I'll let you go. How is she gonna get money? And in Malaysia, we bring in, and Singapore is the same, we bring in people to do the difficult job, the dangerous job, the dirty job, the jobs we don't want to do. And then we have the nerve to look down on them and say, you're less than us because you smell like rubbish. You smell like a dirty toilet. You are just a construction worker covered in dirt. They're doing the jobs that we don't want to do. And then we dishonor them. And then we say, I'm not even going to pay you for it. You pay me to stay in this box that I made for you called a shipping container. Pay me to stay there. Pay me for the little rice I give you. We treat them like slaves. And is it any different in the church? Does the church go out of our way to love and honor and serve and build up the rights of the migrant laborers in this nation? We're no different. I have a friend whose parents, godly people, my friend, young Malaysian, made a cup of coffee for her mom, made a cup of coffee for her dad, made a cup of coffee for herself, and then made a cup of coffee for the maid. And took the coffee to the maid. And the mother said, what are you doing? She has her own coffee. What? this is happening in our day. God noticed the misery of his people in Israel and he intervened. He responded and he set them free. He said, no more slavery. And he rescues them and he says, I want to give you this land that it's fertile and it's beautiful and it's got land and rivers and streams and mountains and oceans. And this is for you. Would you live the way I designed you to? And the people of Israel said, we're going to act like the Egyptians. We're going to act like the gods of Babylon. Still do it today. Our belief system. I have to look good. I have to have a good education. I have to take care of my family. I have to make sure, because I'm afraid what people will think of me if I don't follow the normal path. Because I control my future, because it's all about me and what I want. Love, care for, honor, celebrate, work together with all people. All people have value. All people are made in God's image. The results of our selfishness and greed. The results of our selfishness and greed. God designs this beautiful space for us. What have we done with it? This beautiful work of art. And we've said, I'm going to use it for what I get out of it. Who benefits? People like me. Everyone else, burn. And then we have the book of Habakkuk. And in the book of Habakkuk, the prophet is looking at all of this chaos and all of this injustice and corruption and evil and wrong. And he's saying, God, where are you? Do you not notice what's happening here? It's all falling apart. Violence, oppression, corruption, injustice. It's filling the land. Why aren't you doing anything, God? Why aren't you fixing it? Everyone thinks they're right. They argue because they think they're right. And they fight and they pull out a gun and they shoot each other. They pull out a parang and they kill each other. They are selfish. They want what's best for themselves and they're willing to kill anyone else so long as I get what I want. The law, people don't follow the law. In the courts, the judges just want money. The police just want money. There's corruption. People don't even follow the law. And God, you let them get away with it. You let them be like this. You're supposed to be God of justice, holiness. What are you doing, God? The prophet Habakkuk. And God responds and he says, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to bring judgment. Babylon is coming. Did you just say Babylon is coming? What? Are you serious? Babylon? We're bad. But they are so bad. How does that fix anything? Why would you allow a horribly evil empire to come and punish us? And we're pretty bad, but are you serious? Verse 1 to 5, God says it's coming. Habakkuk says, that's a terrible idea, God. I like Habakkuk because he's real. He's honest. He's genuine. He's not religious at all. He doesn't have a mask. He's willing to share his emotions and his thoughts with God. And like Jeremiah, you can see his reactions. Passionate, emotional. And Habakkuk, the book of Habakkuk is unique because there are no messages from God to the people. The book of Habakkuk is a conversation between the prophet and God. Habakkuk begins by complaining. And he ends with this encounter with God that deeply impacts him. In the book of Habakkuk, God acknowledges Habakkuk's complaint. He acknowledges his concern, validates it. You are right to be angry and disappointed that injustice fills the land. It is right for you to cry out against this corruption and evil. And he promises Habakkuk that he will do something about it. He invites the faithful followers in Jerusalem to trust him. Wait patiently. And they will demonstrate their faithfulness. They'll demonstrate their trust in God by remaining righteous no matter how bad it gets. It's going to get worse. You're going to experience more of this. Will you trust me no matter how bad it gets? Will you follow me no matter how difficult? Habakkuk, is happening at the same time as Jeremiah. He's prophesying during the same period of time. In Josiah's reign, so Jeremiah starts right about the same time. So they're surrounded by false prophets who are promising wealth and prosperity and blessing. And when we read in the beginning, we hear that this army is coming, but we also know that the Assyrians are still in the picture, and so it's before the fall. So the fall of Jerusalem is over here. So it's before the fall of Jerusalem. The main idea, wait for God's justice. Live faithfully and trust God is just. He can be trusted. And it's written to those that are in Judah and Jerusalem who want justice, who want the ways of God, those that have likely turned with Josiah and begin to really give themselves to God. And they're saying, there's so much going on and it's so difficult. Faithful remnant in Judah. Why was it written? To encourage the faithful to live by faith. You practice your faith by living in a way that demonstrates your trust in God. Live with godly character in a time where we're surrounded by so much evil. Look different from the culture. Look different from the systems of government and religion and economics. Trust me and practice this way of faith. Someone read Habakkuk 2:4.
Look at the proud. They trust in themselves and their lives are crooked, but the righteous will live by their faithfulness to God.
So this is the key verse for Habakkuk. Look at the proud. They trust themselves. The righteous live different. Are you aware of violence and disorder and corruption and injustice? Are you aware of places where the vulnerable are exploited? Are you aware of those who are mistreated so that others can get ahead? What is your response? Are you willing to be like the prophet Habakkuk, who cries out to God and says, God, it's not okay. Look at what's happening here. And God invites him into this partnership. He says, come. Chapter 2, he's invited to, he's waiting for God. He's waiting for God's response. I will climb my watchtower now and wait to see what God will say to me, how he will answer my complaint. There's this relationship, this trust, this involvement, partnership. God's speaking over specific injustices. It's talking about those who, this is 2 verse 9. How terrible it will be for you who get rich by unjust means. You believe your wealth will buy you security, putting your family beyond the reach of danger. By the murders you've committed, you've shamed my name and you've forfeited your own lives. Verse 12, how terrible it will be for you who build cities with money gained with murder and corruption. They work so hard, but it's in vain. When you build a society through injustice and corruption, your society can't last. When you build a nation through slave labor, you're building injustice into the fabric of your civilization. We see it here. We see it in my country. We see it in the world around us. And the results are brokenness. I love this verse, this promise. This is Habakkuk 2, verse 14. It says, the time will come when all the earth will be filled as the waters fill the sea with an awareness of the glory of God. There is this promise that God has not left us in this space, but he's going to do something about it. And we are going to have an awareness. Our eyes are going to be opened as humans to see God for who he is. And this is my prayer for Malaysia. We shifted our vision statement in Penang to reflect this. God, would Malaysia have an awareness of who you are that so fills the land, it's like water filling the sea. May we see you for who you are. May the people know you and love you. Habakkuk ends with this awareness that God reveals himself to Habakkuk. He talks about, I've heard about you, God, and I'm filled by the amazing things you've done. In this time of deep need, help us again as you did before. And then he has this vision. I see God, the Holy One, moving across the deserts of Edom and Mount Paran. His splendor fills the heavens and the earth is filled with his praise. And it talks about rays of flashing light from his hands. We rejoice in his awesome power. When he stops, the earth shakes. When he looks, the nations tremble. His power is not diminished in the least. The prophets held these 2 realities. The first one is God is going to bring what? What's God going to bring? The prophet's message. God will bring judgment. And they hold this hope that God is going to restore all things. He's going to send one who can reconcile and bring restoration of all things. He is here with us and he is not finished. We are now ready to begin the book of Zephaniah. We probably are out of time this morning. Those of us that are here, Zephaniah, I actually have an activity for you all. So, what do you think? For processing, would it be helpful just not to open another book and just talk about what we've heard this morning in Habakkuk and Lamentations, Jeremiah? Okay. All right, so we'll jump in tomorrow with a quick overview of Zephaniah. If you all want to look at the picture that I sent you, If you want to, yeah, but we'll do that tomorrow. Any questions, comments, clarification that would be helpful?
Okay.
Yes.
There's a lot of injustice that's happening in Malaysia, especially, you know, the government and everything. So, and also because we have been praying for so many years for, you know, for things to turn around, but yet nothing is happening much. Yeah, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So, but I also see something else, because we are just, you know, the churches, the Christian are always focusing on the government. But what about our churches? You see, because there's a lot of sin in our churches, hidden sins, secret sins, everything that's going on, and they think they are righteous and they're pointing the finger at the government. But I told them, what about us? We have to check ourselves first, because God always starts his judgment in the house of God, not, you know. So God can use, like when we are studying all this, why God can use Babylonian, Assyrian, all this to, not to help the Israelites to come back to him. But why the churches fail to see this, and they always keep blaming the government, they keep, you know, their prayer is always, God, look at the injustice, look at, but there are so many injustice happening in the churches. Yeah, there's a lot of sexual sins, hidden sexual sins happening in the churches. I also encountered some, and it's just terrible. But it's sad that they don't see this and they keep blaming the government. Yeah, it's something that in my
I think you are spot on, and you're so wise to recognize the problem is not just out there. The problem is me in this. And if we look at the nation of Israel, who is supposed to be God's representative, and we make a parallel to the church of today, we are also supposed to be representing God's character and kingdom and culture. The people of Israel were less interested in following God, and they were more interested in looking like the culture that surrounded them. And I think we could say the same thing about many in the church globally, not just Malaysia, that we look just like everyone else. And so these prophets are calling us to say, you as an individual, you as a family, you choose to follow me. You live righteously by your faith and give hope to those that are holding out. Like you said, we've been praying for so long, and we want to give up. And I think that's what this message of Habakkuk to say, the wicked trust only in themselves, whereas the righteous choose to trust God. Well, how long do you trust? And this is where Habakkuk, he starts with, how long, God, must I cry out for your help and you don't listen? I think that's a very honest, emotional response to the fact that sometimes God doesn't answer our prayer in the time and the way we want, and we don't understand. And to me, like in 2000, I think it was 2019, I spent a lot of time in Habakkuk because it just felt like there's so much injustice, and our prayers aren't doing anything. And so this challenge to live by our faith, it's an ongoing thing. Will you live by faith if you're the only one in the culture? Will you live by faith today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, if nothing changes? And it's not just out there. It's how am I going to live today? So, yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think change starts in the church, but change doesn't just start in the institution. Change starts in the individual children who say, I choose to live by this faith. And also, I think this is why I like the prophets, because it shows us what it looks like when someone does live by their faith. Like Jeremiah, we see, decades of faithful service, and he's oppressed, and he's mistreated, and he's abused, and everything goes wrong, and he doesn't give up. am I willing to be faithful like that? Daniel is going to stand for decades and never turn his back on God. Am I willing to be that kind of person who lives by my faith? Any thoughts, Rufus? Questions? I know we're speaking about Malaysia a lot, but we're like family, cousins. I know situation in Singapore is not exactly the same, but I think a lot of times there's similarities. And so don't feel like we think less of you because you're Singaporean.
Yeah, it's okay. People are equally terrible everywhere.
Well, thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Tomorrow we're going to jump into Zephaniah and Obadiah, and then get into Ezekiel. So if you're reading, if you could read Zephaniah, Obadiah, Ezekiel, that'd be awesome. Bless you. And I'll send you, I'll get some notes. We'll send them through Grace to you all.
Yeah. That's now the notes too. If you can send it to the email, would be better.
Yeah, we'll send you the notes this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Elsie.
Yep.
Bye, Rufus. Thanks for joining.